As Richard Nixon told it, his May 8, 1972 decision to bomb North Vietnam and mine its harbors was tough, one that put the nation's interests ahead of his own interests. An act of political courage undertaken despite a host of risks. That the bombing and mining might prove unpopular. That the Soviet Union might cancel the upcoming Moscow summit. That he might not get re-elected or even renominated. He contended, however, that the attack on the North's capital and ports proved to be the right decision for America to thwart a communist takeover of South Vietnam. All these claims fit the heroic image Nixon cultivated of himself as the man in the arena of Teddy Roosevelt's famous speech, one who dares greatly and spends himself in a worthy cause. So how does this image square with reality?
The situation is grave in South Vietnam's northern Quang Tri province as North Vietnamese troops and tanks continue to advance. North Vietnamese forces today captured the last two South Vietnamese bases along the demilitarized zone. One was Camp Carroll, the former American base. Troops there surrendered to the enemy shortly after American advisors were evacuated from the base by helicopter.
If the island collapses, we've done everything we can, Mr. President.
If the island collapses, that's a question that we can't even think about. If the island collapses, a lot of other things will collapse around here. If we were going to collapse, we had to do it a year ago. We can't do it this year.
Nixon couldn't afford South Vietnam's defeat in 1972, when it would likely bring his own defeat in the election.
Like I say, let's don't talk about, well, if the island collapses, then we can't have. That's fine with regard to this. We're playing a much bigger game. We're playing a Russian game, a Chinese game, an election game. And we're not going to have the island collapse. It is going to hurt us. This kind of an attack is going to hurt us, provided we fight back in the Iron Holes.
A full-scale invasion isn't guerrilla warfare, but conventional warfare. So the U.S. commander in Vietnam, General Creighton Abrams, could respond with conventional air power, sending B-52s to bomb large units of communist troops. Abrams credited his use of American air power on southern battlefields with the Saigon government's survival of the invasion, and objected when the president decided to divert some of the B-52s from the south to attack targets in the north.
Abrams flatly refused to go until I ordered him to do it.
Every B-52 strike in the north, you ran down their throats. They didn't want to do it. We've had to order it from here against cables from the Air Force and the paper telling us not to do it.
When Nixon ordered B-52 strikes on Hanoi and Haiphong Harbor in the first weekend of May, the general postponed the attack, later telling military historians that the president wanted to send B-52s away hunting rabbits while the backyard was filled with lions. Bombing logistical targets in the north might decrease the flow of supplies to communist troops a few months in the future, but Abrams was using the B-52s to stop those troops from seizing southern territory in the present. Nixon canceled the airstrike, but a few days later he went on national television to announce the full-scale bombing and mining of North Vietnam. Nixon had excellent reason to believe that the bombing and the mining would succeed in one way, politically. 3 years earlier, a confidential survey commissioned by the Republican National Committee measured the popularity of 4 alternative exit strategies for Vietnam. Fighting on until victory got less than majority support, 37%. Agreeing to just anything for a 6-month withdrawal got even less support, 30%. Continuing to negotiate while conducting a 2-year withdrawal got a bare majority of 51%. But one exit strategy got a 2/3 majority. The United States would decide to end the war in Vietnam with a compromise settlement within 6 months. During those 6 months, we would try to get the other side to agree to terms that are reasonably favorable to us, such as free elections in South Vietnam under international supervision. To do this, we would take necessary military actions, such as blockade of the port of Haiphong, and as a last resort, selective bombing of North Vietnam. No additional U.S. troops would be sent. Spending 6 months bombing and blockading the North to get a compromise settlement had 66% support. In 1969, the president secretly had plans drawn up to bomb and mine, and issued a secret ultimatum to Hanoi. If the negotiations didn't produce results by November 1st, 1969, the president will be forced to take measures of the gravest consequence. To make this threat credible, historians William Burr and Jeffrey Kimball found the president went so far as to put U.S. nuclear forces on a higher state of readiness and sent dire warnings through the diplomatic backchannel to the Soviets. In October, however, Kissinger gave Nixon a 61-page memo analyzing what it would take for the bombing and mining to succeed. To attempt this course of action and fail, the National Security Advisor warned, would be a catastrophe. The attacks on the North would aim at disrupting the flow of supplies Hanoi needed to make war. Bombs and mines, however, wouldn't destroy supplies that were already dispersed, and the Communists had enough supplies already distributed to sustain them for months. Even if Hanoi's ports were closed and its railways destroyed, it could still get supplies by land across its long border with China. Hanoi will be an extremely hard nut to crack, Kissinger wrote, and the North Vietnamese leaders may well conclude that having held out this far, they can do so sufficiently longer to leave us no choice but to back off. Nixon faced a dilemma. What if he implemented the most popular exit strategy, bombing and mining the North for 6 months, and Hanoi still held out? Or what if he got Hanoi to settle in 1969, but the deal came unraveled during his first term? Either way, his failure would be public, and his grandest political ambitions would be derailed. Nixon had assumed the presidency from Lyndon B. Johnson, hoping to replace the liberal Democratic coalition that had elected Johnson, John F. Kennedy, Harry S. Truman, and Franklin D. Roosevelt with the conservative Republican coalition. Key to his plans was Vietnam.
The greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker.
Johnson's failure to win the peacemaker title in Vietnam created an opportunity for Republicans. During the 1960s, the rising conservative movement rallied around the claim that Johnson's failure stemmed from self-imposed restrictions on the use of American military power. Barry Goldwater, the Republicans' 1964 presidential nominee, called for bombing industrial targets around Hanoi and blockading its main harbor of Haiphong. And California Governor Ronald Reagan said, "There are still a list of targets in North Vietnam that are not open to bombing by our forces, and I don't think the full technological power of the United States is being used." But no politician rode the issue as effectively as Richard Nixon, who advocated bombing military targets in Hanoi and mining Haiphong as steps to win the war. If, as president, Nixon bombed and mined, and Hanoi either refused to settle or made a settlement that didn't stick, Nixon would have proved Johnson's critics wrong, including himself. Nixon's November 1st, 1969 deadline came and went. Hanoi called his bluff. But Nixon didn't carry out his threat. Instead, he made a speech.
The American people cannot and should not be asked to support a policy which involves the overriding issues of war and peace unless they know the truth about that policy.
The president did ask America for support, but did not say anything about the policy that had just failed. Not the ultimatum he had secretly given the North, nor the deadline that had just passed, nor the way Hanoi had called his bluff, nor his decision to back down from his ultimatum. All this remained secret, not from the communists, but from us. Instead of telling us what had happened, Nixon spoke of political courage.
There were some who urged that I end the war at once by ordering the immediate withdrawal of all American forces. From a political standpoint, this would have been a popular and easy course to follow.
Quickly withdrawing from Vietnam, as the president knew from the secret GOP poll, was the least popular exit strategy. So unpopular that no presidential candidate in 1968 advocated immediate withdrawal. A president who pulled out of Vietnam without plausibly claiming victory would be accused of allowing American troops to die in vain, of accepting defeat, of surrender. If Nixon did that, he couldn't even get renominated, much less reelected. During his November 1969 speech, Nixon told America he was making progress in the war. Something he could do, in part, because General Abrams had achieved some real military success.